From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the fourth day of the 2023 legislative session, and it saw the first bills pass through their chambers of origin. The House and Senate met for about 5 hours before adjourning for spring break, meaning they won't meet again until April 4th. For today's action, we'll start in the House, where two priority bills were before the body starting this morning. House Bill 1 from Representative Matt Simpson of Daphne was first on the agenda. The bill stiffens penalties for those convicted of trafficking fentanyl in the state of Alabama. The deadly drug has been blamed for an increase in opioid overdoses and deaths, including among young people. Simpson gained a bipartisan, unanimous vote in favor of the bill, a rare occurrence for a criminal justice measure.
And the code already has mixture of fentanyl in the code written, so that's already in the statute. The bill that came through today only covered pure single component fentanyl. So, if you have a gram of pure single component fentanyl, that can kill up to 500 people. This bill did not address, laced with hydrocodone or laced with Oxycontin or laced with other how it's laced through the process. This only addressed pure fentanyl. The reason why we did that way was because we wanted to go after the actual people that were bringing it into the community. We don't want to go after the kid on the street. We don't want to go after the addicts. We don't want to go after the users. We want to go after the distributors and the traffickers, and we wanted them to know, we're coming after you, and there's going to be teeth to this law, and if you're convicted of this, you're going to go to prison, and you're going to go to a prison for a long time.
Next up was House Bill 101 from Representative Jenny Shaver of Leesburg. It aims to streamline Alabama's adoption process to make it less costly and burdensome for parents to adopt. Shaver said she and a working group of advocates have been crafting this legislation for years. It also passed unanimously.
Glad to have it across the finish line. It's been a long time coming. My involvement with this particular bill has only been about a year and a half, but it's been very intensive. A lot of work by the committee, and I have to give credit to the committee. Please, y'all make this clear that it was judges, current and retired adoption attorneys, representatives from DHR, people who are actually in the business and know what happens on the ground and deal with it in their professions every day. So they were the experts that know the ins and outs and every little detail to know how to tweak it and how to make it better. So I want to give the committee the credit for this bill.
The state Senate also took up its priority bills today. Senate Bill 113 from Senator Garland Gudger of Coleman would require health care facilities, including hospitals and nursing homes, to allow in-person visits in several scenarios, such as end of life, during childbirth, and for pediatric patients. During floor debate, State Senator Marika Coleman of Birmingham asked Gudger if the bill contained language that would protect patients from visitors who may have a contagious condition. Senator Coleman's concern was due to her real-life experience from visiting the hospital to see her now-deceased husband.
If I had gone into that hospital carrying something and he be exposed to something that I have, in this particular situation, COVID, how are we going to ensure that the visitors coming in don't further expose the people that we just really want to be there to help and support?
If there's noticeably somebody that comes into the hospital as a visitor and needs to be checked for whether that's COVID or flu or anything, and you don't want that particular visitor to go into a patient's room and infect other people and that patient, especially if you're looking like at a cancer patient with low white blood cells or something like that, then through the hospital's procedures and policies that they have put in this bill, they are able to test anybody that comes in. If the doctor deems that this particular patient doesn't need to have visitors, for example, church groups, the general population come and visit, that doctors can still have the authority to not allow visitors in that room except for one essential caregiver at least once a day for 2 hours minimum, and if there is visiting hours.
That bill passed unanimously and now goes to the House. Senate Bill 1 from Senator April Weaver of Briarfield seeks to amend the state's good time policy for incentivizing inmates' good behavior behind bars. Senator Bobby Singleton of Greensboro argued for some changes to the bill so it wouldn't roll back good time credits so drastically, and ensuring those who are victims of assault or participate in peaceful protests aren't unfairly punished.
The only thing that's different in what you are doing and what we want in the substitute, we're making sure that people who are in who may be in those situations of self-defense is being identified, is not being taken away their good time because they were in a self-defense state. We're also making sure that those people who may be just peacefully protesting is not being considered that they are rioting. And also we're making sure that you get the data that you need, that you are asking the Department of Correction for.
Senator Singleton and I worked over his sub that he just offered. Yesterday we came to the agreement that these are some areas that we could agree on.
Weaver accepted the amendment, and the Senate voted to add it to the bill before passing it 30-1 and sending it to the House. The bill was named after Bibb County Deputy Sheriff Brad Johnson, whose alleged killer was an inmate who had a shortened sentence because of good time policies. Johnson's colleague and friend, Deputy Chris Poole, was also shot during that incident that took Johnson's life. Deputy Poole was in the Senate gallery when the bill passed.
On behalf of Deputy Brad Johnson and his friends and family, I thank my colleagues for this today. Deputy Poole, we're glad that you can be here with us. We appreciate you and wish you well in your recovery, and hopefully by this step that we've taken today, we've made safer communities for all of the state of Alabama, and that you and your colleagues will never have to go through things like this again. And thank you for all that you've done to help get this bill passed.
I'll speak with Senator Singleton about his amendment when we come back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Senator Bobby Singleton, Minority Leader for the Alabama State Senate. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you.
So you've been a long week, been a long 3 weeks.
Yes.
Y'all are finishing up today, having adjourned for spring break, really. But an issue you were really involved in came before the floor. You were involved in committee, talking about the good time statute. Senator April Weaver was personally involved in this, wanted a bill to reform that policy at the prisons. But you engaged, had a substitute of your own, but eventually amendment. Walk me through some of your objections to her bill and how you involved yourself.
Well, under the good time law of the state of Alabama, every person that basically goes in has, they fall under one of 4 categories of good time law. And so what her bill does is basically back that out. Right now you can get, for every 30 days, you will get 75 days of good time law. And so that's a start in category 1. And hers will be a 30 for 30. And one of the biggest things that I thought that this bill, in terms of having unintended consequences, that we're currently under a federal court order right now for overcrowdedness. Her bill right now, by taking it away from the inmates, will add another 810 days to a 10-year sentence when you just started looking at the sentences. I made an offer to her to look at, for every 30 days, we'll do 60 days. We'll give 60 instead of 75. And when you look at the reduction of my bill, a person will only stay in jail on that same 10-year sentence only 241 more days. And I think that that's much more palatable to what the federal government would look at. I just don't know how they're going to look at it in terms of our overcrowdedness, whether or not they would take that in consideration and say, hey, maybe they're trying to do something to streamline this, but at the end of the day, we're causing people to stay inside the prison system much more longer.
So, so you're saying by going with the bill as written, it would be a signal to DOJ / the courts
Yes.
that perhaps, wait, they're not doing what we asked them to do in
Yes.
terms of prison population.
And I'm afraid of that. I am afraid of that.
Well, but and look, to your credit, you have been for a state solution this whole time and not wanted a takeover. So I believe you there. So where did y'all end up? Because I know you had a substitute bill, but then it became an amendment.
Yes. So what we came up, the bill basically addresses a lot of other different things. It addressed it, rioting and whether or not a person on the inside, because the person that unfortunately killed those officers on that day had escaped and was still out and getting good time credit for that.
Never should have been the case.
Never
right?
should have been the case. And I agree with her on that. I think that if you escape, if you make assault, if you murder someone
That's not
inside
good time.
inside the prisons, it should be taken away from
Right.
you. But what I was against was the blanket coverage of it. Even though guys who are in there who want to do right and trying to do right deserve a second chance. I'm a second chance kind of guy. And so I believe in people can get better. And so for those people, we're punishing them also for a bad actor.
See.
And that's what I didn't want to happen. And so what we settled on was, in any instance when a person may have been defending themselves, if there may be a fight, instead of a defendant, maybe an assault, instead of taking your good time away for assault, if the warden look at it and see that you were defending yourself, it would be just simple self-defense, and no good time will be taken from you. We also settled on rioting, because there was a real precise definition on rioting inside of the bill, where there were going to be riots. But what I looked at that is the difference between a person wanting to peacefully protest their First Amendment rights. And so what we were able to do, we were able to keep rioting in the bill, and we excluded the right to peacefully protest, okay?
Some careful definitions there.
Yes, we did that. And so we also put in a reporting mechanism in an amendment that I gave that will seek a database to get the numbers of all the incidents and the number of people that are on good time. And she agreed to that also. That was something that she wanted, and she felt that the Department of Correction could not do it. So what I'm offering in the bill will be something that they have to do now, is to keep those records.
So are you comfortable with what passed the Senate?
Well, I still voted no against the bill. Let's be honest about it. And I voted no simply because it still has a blanket effect.
Okay.
Versus targeting those people who are bad actors. We're still punishing everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, but more comfortable than it
Yes.
started. And
Yes.
but do you think there'll be more changes in the House, maybe?
Well, I'm not sure, because I think it's a really an agreed upon bill by the Republican Party. Senator Weaver has worked this bill very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, the amendments that we got on is probably going to be as close as we're going to get. I don't know if she's going to ever come off those numbers in terms of the numbers in the categories. So I think we've probably gotten it as best as we possibly can get it.
Mm-hmm. So also the governor's office, they can also send back executive amendments.
Yes.
You never know. What I mean by that is they run the Department of Corrections. They have an opinion, I'm sure, on this too.
Yes. And the governor already has a executive order out on this.
Right.
And that's what I was trying to balance between the governor's executive order, what was out there, because what we started to do was just to codify the governor's executive order, and that's basically what my substitute did, was kind of codify the governor's executive order.
Yeah. Well, switching gears while I've got you, like I said, we're going into spring break. You'll have a week off. Coming back from that week, what do you think are going to be the big ticket items that we see, at least in the state Senate?
Well, I think number one is probably going to be incentives. We have a Jobs Act that's going to come up. I think there's 4 bills under that. It has to be renewed. It was sunset every 3 years.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for months, really.
We have. And so I think we finally gotten some agreements here and there as to what we're going to do with those bills. And that's going to be the big ticket item that's coming back. And I think we'll be able to get something. And it's very bipartisan. I think that we've worked through it very well. I know I've been at the table. There have been consideration on both sides of the aisle from the Department of Commerce, from Leader Reed, and leading this, has made sure that We were able to have our input at every level of the negotiations in this bill. So I think that it's been a bill that's been vetted from both sides of the aisle, and plus I think it's going to be good for the state of Alabama.
Well, we can't wait to see those details whenever the bills are dropped.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for your time. Senator Bobby Singleton, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Olympian Jesse Owens dominated the 1936 Olympics with 4 track and field gold medals in the 100-meter dash, the 200-meter dash, the long jump, and the 4x100-meter relay. The Lawrence County native dominated track and field from a young age. While in college at the Big Ten Championships, Owens set 3 world records and tied a 4th in less than 1 hour. Owens is widely remembered as the nation's greatest Olympian.
Joining me next is State Representative Joe Lovvorn from Auburn, Chairman of the House Rules Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Always great to be with you.
So y'all are finished with this first kind of real week of session of the regular session. That means you've been, in your position as Rules Chairman, presiding kind of over that flow of legislation. How did it go with this first week?
It's been a great first week. We started the session, and then the governor put us immediately into the special session, of course, for the ARPA funds. And so this week we really got into the business of people filing bills and working through the committee process, where the real meat of legislation is done, is in that committee environment. Mm-hmm. So it's been great seeing what bills have coming out, what are important to our members, and trying to work through that flow of different legislation. So a lot of work done by our committee chairman this week, a lot of sponsors of some great legislation that are moving through the process as we've kicked off this session.
Mm-hmm. So can you kind of remind us of your role in that process? Because, all right, bills get filed, they get sent to committee. If they come out of committee, they're essentially sent to the Rules Committee for y'all to make a decision, correct?
Certainly. The Rules Committee exists, I like to say, right at that policy and politics intersection where we work through to try to make sure the legislation is passed through the committee. Did the amendments do what the people intend for it to do? And try to get a meaning of where that legislation needs to go to the floor at what time, mm-hmm. scheduling to make sure the flow of legislation happens in an efficient manner for the people that are working on it, the stakeholders that have an interest in how that legislation would affect if it turns into an act. And so when the committees pass those bills, it comes to the Rules Committee, and then we will either let them flow out through what's called the regular order calendar, which we're on now. So they basically are on the calendar as they are approved by committee, and those committees report them as passed out of committee. And then any resolutions filed by members comes before the Rules Committee for approval to go to a vote of the entire House. So ours is sort of a collecting point for the bills as they come out of committee, resolutions as filed by the members, to try to create an even, efficient flow to the members as the whole vote of the body.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially important once we get into the meat of the session when there could be 1,000 bills out there. Now maybe all those won't pass committee, but you could have hundreds, literally, that are through committee into the Rules Committee. And if you just open it up to basically do it chronologically, that could be a real mess in terms of bottling up the maybe more prioritized bills. Is that a fair way to put it?
That is very fair. These first couple weeks, it's easy for that flow because there's only a certain number of bills that are being passed out of committee. So we're, like I say, working through that regular order as they come in. So beyond this point, and after the break that we're on, we will come back and we will start working under a special order calendar where we will take those as a committee and we'll establish a list of bills that seem to be a priority for our members as they come out of the committees, to find what is the best flow to put those bills on the calendar in an order that's important to the speaker, important to the members, and try to get that flow so everybody has a chance to get their legislation through. Mm-hmm. We have some calendars that'll come up. In fact, our Sunset Committee they have bills that have to be passed by statute before the 10th legislative day. So when we get back, we'll be working with Chairman Wilcox to make sure we get those on the calendar, so we'll have a sunset calendar. So we may have a day that's nothing but sunset bills.
Yeah.
So working with those, aligning with the requirements of the Constitution for our body, and then starting that special order calendar, which is picked by the members of the Rules Committee to establish a flow of legislation on a calendar.
Well, speaking of rules, I wanted to ask you about this because on the floor today, there was a little bit of an exchange between Representative Moore and the Speaker about maybe a misunderstanding of the procedure on the floor. She was concerned that she wasn't going to get to speak on amendments. Can you kind of walk me through what happened?
Well, it seemed from talking with Ms. Moore that she went to a committee meeting she's not a member of that committee, and they had a presentation, and usually from a chairman's standpoint of a committee, there's not just interaction from the audience unless there's a public hearing that is asked for, which can be requested by any member of the state or any member of the legislature to allow public input. And it was no formal legislation going past, it was just a presentation. And Ms. Moore attended that meeting and tried to interject. And I think there was a disagreement with the chairman of that interaction. And then today on the floor, she had questions of that and questions of how a amendment would flow to the floor or not. We had a rule change to where bills come out of committee.
Right.
If they're amended, that amendment is rolled into the legislation so it's clearly stated for transparency's sake of where that amendment affects that bill. And as it's a new procedure, and certainly want to work with Ms. Moore to make sure that the whole goal of that is transparency. And she's wanting transparency. She wants to make sure people have a voice, and that's exactly why that rule's in place, to create more transparency. So I think there's just some confusion in this first week, and she certainly has a right to ask that question at the appropriate time. And I look forward to working with her to make sure she understands that, and happy to help her in any way.
Well, speaking of the floor, there were two pretty significant bills that passed. One was HB1, right? The big priority bill on fentanyl. Representative Simpson's bill. He sat here and explained all of it, so I won't ask you to go through that. But pretty significant to me that it was unanimous, considering a lot of times on these criminal justice bills, when it comes to increasing penalties, things like that, a lot of Democrats will take pause on that kind of stuff and maybe not support it. Wasn't the case this time. They were absolutely supportive. Talk about the significance of that.
Well, this fentanyl situation is affecting everyone. It is a crisis that is so potent. This toxic item coming across our border into our state is affecting everyone's lives. When someone may make a life lesson mistake with other drugs or alcohol they're trying, this is a life-ending mistake when it involves it, unfortunately, because the potency, I've explained it to my kids, it's sort of a nuclear bomb of drugs, where it's not just going to be injury, this is life-ending. If you have too high of a dosage in anything, so trusting tablets, trusting pills, you just can't do that anymore. And across the board, cross party lines, it's an issue affecting everyone in Alabama. And Alabama is tired of it. People talk about it all the time. They're ready to hold a line. If they're not going to stop this fentanyl from coming across the border, when it gets to Alabama, when it's dealing with the dealers that are putting this toxic item out there, it's been a priority of the Speaker of the House, Speaker Ledbear's work to walk this legislation, said this is my priority, let's get this done. And Chairman Simpson done an amazing job with this bill, getting the correct information. It went through committee without amendment, just really to the floor. And then, as you saw, 105-0, which you rarely see on something this controversial. It's a problem. It's a line that needed to be drawn, and I'm so proud of the people of Alabama and the Alabama House of Representatives drawing that line today.
The other, we don't have time to talk about it, but the adoption overhaul, we had Representative Shaver on here to explain that. Also unanimous. So y'all had a pretty successful first week on the floor.
I would say it's a very good day. We moved Alabama forward today. We held a line on a dangerous drug and cleared the way for it easier for the adoption process in Alabama. It's not a bad week in my mind when you're talking about the legislature. I'm very, very excited about what we did and applaud the work that my fellow members have done and the leadership of the Speaker to get us here.
So they've earned their spring break.
They have.
Well, Representative Lovvorn, thanks again for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thank you. Enjoyed it as always.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capitol Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capitol Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capitol Journal podcasts.
Daniel Pratt was Alabama's first major industrialist and founded the present-day city of Prattville as a self-sufficient manufacturing center. His factory complex, the Pratt Gin Company, became the world's largest manufacturer of cotton gins. Pratt was instrumental in Alabama's transformation from a predominantly rural economy to a more diverse industrial economy, devoted to manufacturing and the production of coal, iron, and steel.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30 for Capitol Journal's Week in Review. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.